Money is not the reason your life feels stuck. It's the evidence, quiet, consistent evidence of a pattern that has been running long before you ever tried to fix it. Because if you look closely, your financial life is not chaotic. It's structured. It follows a rhythm. Money comes in, and something inside you immediately assigns it a role: relief, escape, permission. And before you even realize it, that money begins to move out of your hands, back into the world, almost as if it never belonged to you in the first place. This isn't carelessness. It's conditioning. You were never taught to hold money with intention. You were taught to react to it, to feel something the moment it arrives. And that feeling, whether it's excitement, anxiety, or urgency, quietly controls every decision that follows. So you repeat the cycle, not because you lack discipline, but because your identity is calibrated to a level where stability feels unfamiliar and growth feels temporary. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you return to the level of your internal standard. And that standard was built in silence, through what you saw, what you heard, what you experienced, and what you made it all mean. Which means every financial decision you're making today is not just about money. It's about a belief you've never questioned. A belief about what you deserve, what you're capable of, and what is normal for someone like you. And until that belief is exposed, nothing you do will truly change, because more money will not fix a mind that is designed to release it. It will only amplify the pattern, accelerate the loss, and leave you wondering why progress never stays. And here's the shift, the one almost nobody teaches you. Wealth is not built by adding more. It is built by becoming different, by seeing money differently before you ever touch it, by removing the emotional reactions that have been driving your decisions and replacing them with something far more dangerous: awareness. Because the moment you begin to see your patterns clearly, you interrupt them. The moment you question what once felt automatic, you take back control. And slowly, something changes beneath your behavior. You stop spending to feel better. You stop chasing to feel secure. You stop proving, escaping, compensating. And instead, you start choosing, deliberately, quietly, powerfully. Your standards rise. Your patience strengthens. Your relationship with money becomes less emotional and more intentional. And that is the moment your financial life begins to shift, not on the surface, but at the root. Because once the belief changes, the behavior no longer needs to be forced. It follows, naturally, automatically, permanently. So before we talk about strategies, before we talk about actions, we need to go deeper than that. We need to uncover the foundation that has been shaping every decision you've made without your permission. Chapter 1 begins here, where your financial identity was first created and the hidden beliefs that have been controlling your life this entire time. Chapter 1. The first lie about money. You did not wake up one morning and decide to stay financially stuck. It happened quietly. It happened through small sentences, repeated in the dark. Money is hard. Rich people are different. Security comes from holding on. Life is expensive. There is never enough. Those sentences did not sound dangerous when you first heard them. They sounded practical. They sounded adult. They sounded like caution. But caution, repeated long enough, becomes a cage. You started treating money like a visitor, not a tool. Something that comes in, solves the panic for a moment, and disappears before you can ask it anything more. So every payment felt like rescue. Every bill felt like punishment. Every extra dollar felt like permission to breathe. That is not wealth. That is survival with nicer packaging. Stop for a second. Think about your last financial decision. Was it led by clarity or by relief? The truth is, most people never form a clean relationship with money. They form an emotional relationship with pressure. They do not learn how to direct money. They learn how to react to it. That difference shapes everything. If money enters your life and the first question in your mind is what it can soothe, then money will never stay long enough to become a source of strength. It will rush to the loudest fire. It will disappear into mood, impulse, fear, and image. You will call that normal, because almost everybody around you lives the same way. But normal is often just a crowd of people repeating damage. You are likely praised for coping, not for controlling. Praised for getting through, not for building. Praised for managing stress, not for creating order. So you carried that same pattern into your finances. When money arrived, you did not ask how to make it serve the future. You asked how to make the present hurt less. That is the first lie. The lie says money is for comfort first. Comfort is not evil. But when comfort becomes the first command, power never gets a chance to grow. Wealthy people do not worship money. They assign it. They do not ask money to calm every feeling. They put it to work with discipline before emotion gets a vote. Pause here. Be honest. How often have you spent money to change a feeling rather than to build a life? A lot of people think wealth begins with more income. Sometimes it does. Often it does not. Plenty of people earn more and remain trapped because their inner rules never changed. They still spend from panic. They still avoid looking at numbers. They still crave proof that they are doing okay. So they buy symbols. They buy temporary status. They buy peace for an evening and call it freedom. But peace purchased that way always expires. If you use money to avoid discomfort, then discomfort becomes your master. A hard day will cost you. A lonely night will cost you. A bad week will cost you. An argument, boredom, envy, insecurity, exhaustion, all of it will drain your future because your money has no command structure. It only has emotional exits. This is where most people stop. They hear this and blame the system, the economy, their childhood, their family, their city. Those forces are real. They can be brutal. But if you stop there, nothing changes inside you. And if nothing changes inside you, every new dollar enters the same broken room. The truth is, wealth starts when money stops being medicine. That line matters. Money is a tool. Money is stored choice. Money is time waiting for your command. Money is disciplined energy. When you misuse it, you are not just losing cash. You are wasting future control. You can see this in daily habits. You delay looking at your account because you do not want to feel exposed. You say yes to costs you secretly resent because you want to look generous, relaxed, successful, or unbothered. You refuse to plan because planning makes the truth visible. Then you call the result bad luck. It is not always bad luck. A lot of the time it is untrained thought. Stop again. Not to judge yourself, to see yourself clearly. The person who gets wealthy slowly is usually not louder, smarter, or more impressive than you. That person just stopped assigning money to emotional repair. That person stopped needing every dollar to prove a point, relieve a fear, or support a performance. That person created distance between feeling and action. In that distance, power appeared. You need that distance. You need to be able to sit in desire without obeying it. Sit in fear without reacting to it. Sit in envy without spending because of it. Sit in emptiness without decorating it with purchases. Wealth is not built by intensity. It is built by control, and control starts with a hard admission. Part of you may not actually want wealth. Part of you may only want the appearance of ease. Those are not the same thing. Wealth asks for structure. Ease asks for escape. Wealth asks for patience. Escape asks for now. You already know which voice usually wins. This is not a character flaw. It is conditioning. But conditioning only has power while it stays hidden. Once you see it, you can challenge it. Once you challenge it, you stop calling it your personality. You call it what it is, a pattern. And patterns can be broken. The heavy insight is simple. You do not rise financially until money stops being your emotional caretaker. You rise when money becomes your disciplined servant. The day that shift happens, even in a small way, Your future stops leaking through your habits and starts gathering behind your choices. Then the next truth gets harder. Chapter 2. The price of playing small. Playing small does not always look weak. Sometimes it looks responsible, sometimes it looks humble, sometimes it looks like staying realistic. You tell yourself you are being careful. You tell yourself you are avoiding disappointment. You tell yourself it is better not to ask for much, better not to risk too much, better not to want too much. But under that quiet language is often the same old fear. If you expect little, you will not have to face your own hesitation. That hesitation costs more than failure ever could. You shrink your goals so your habits do not get exposed. You avoid learning because learning would force action. You keep your income tied to what feels familiar because unfamiliar numbers would demand a new version of you. So you protect your current identity by calling it peace. It is not peace. It is containment. Look closely at your patterns. Where have you lowered the ceiling just so you would not have to change? The truth is, financial struggle is not always caused by lack. It is often caused by permission. You do not give yourself permission to think bigger than the people who raised you. You do not give yourself permission to earn more than the version of you that still wants approval. You do not give yourself permission to become difficult to understand. So you stay legible, you stay harmless, you stay predictable. And that predictability becomes expensive. Every time you undercharge, under-ask, delay the hard conversation, refuse the skill, or stay in the room that keeps you small, you are paying a hidden tax. The tax is not only money, it is confidence, it is timing, it is self-respect, it is momentum. Playing small looks safe in the short term because it protects you from friction, but over time it becomes a slow form of self-betrayal. This is where most people stop. They say they want wealth, but only if nobody feels uncomfortable with their growth. That condition will keep you average for life. Money grows around value, confidence, and clear standards. It does not gather around apology. Stop for a second. Think about the last time you made yourself smaller to make somebody else feel settled. Wealthy people are not simply better with numbers. They are often better with tension. They can survive the tension of asking for more, the tension of waiting, the tension of being misunderstood, the tension of hearing no without collapsing. Financial growth demands emotional tolerance before it delivers visible reward. If you need instant approval, you will sabotage long-term gain. That is why so many people stay stuck in familiar struggle. Familiar struggle has an identity attached to it. You know how to explain it. You know how to blame it. You know how to live inside it. But unfamiliar growth feels lonely at first. It asks you to do strange things, to save when others spend, to study when others scroll, to say no when others say yes, to invest in silence while everyone else performs urgency. That silence can feel unnatural until it starts producing results. The truth is, playing small is not modesty. It is often fear, wearing clean clothes. You see it in people who say money does not matter, but lose sleep over every bill. You see it in people who mock ambition because they are scared of their own potential. You see it in people who act proud of struggle because struggle is the only identity they know how to defend. You see it in yourself when you treat your current limits as permanent facts rather than temporary conditions. Temporary conditions become permanent when you build your personality around them. Pause here. Let that settle. You cannot build wealth while protecting the habits that keep you dependent. You cannot earn freedom while staying loyal to an image of yourself that was formed in survival. At some point, you have to decide whether your comfort with your old identity matters more than your future. That decision shows up in tiny moments, in whether you open the book, in whether you make the call, in whether you learn the language of assets, leverage, pricing, negotiation, and ownership instead of pretending those things are for other people. The gate stays closed because you keep standing outside it, Acting like the lock is personal. It is not personal. It is structural. And structure can be studied. This matters because wealth is not only about getting more, it is about no longer shrinking in the presence of possibility. If opportunity scares you more than struggle, your mind is still calibrated for containment. You will push away every open door because it does not fit the script you have memorized about yourself. This is where most people stop. They wait to feel ready. They wait for more confidence. They wait for certainty. But confidence grows after action, not before it. Read that again in your mind. Confidence grows after action, not before it. The people who move ahead are not free of fear. They are free of obedience to fear. That is the difference. You do not need arrogance. You need standards. You do not need hype. You need clarity. You do not need to announce your next level. You need to stop kneeling before the old story that says smaller is safer. Smaller is not safer when it starves your future. The heavy truth here is brutal. Every time you make yourself smaller than your capacity, you train your life to match your retreat. Income follows courage more often than talent. Opportunity follows visibility, preparation, and nerve. If you hide those things to remain acceptable, you are paying for your own invisibility. And what comes next is even less comfortable because some of your daily rituals keep the trap alive. Chapter 3. Scarcity is a daily ritual. Scarcity is not just an amount. It is a pattern of thought, repeated so often that it starts to feel like wisdom. It sounds like caution. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like realism. But most of the time, it is just fear with a serious face. You can have more money and still live inside scarcity. You can get the raise and still think like loss is waiting. You can build savings and still move through life as if every decision is a threat. That is why some people earn more and stay tense. Their outer numbers changed. Their inner ritual did not. Scarcity is practiced. It is practiced when you focus on what leaves, but never on what grows. When you treat every cost as pain, but never ask how money can create return. When you spend with urgency, save with resentment, and invest with suspicion. When you stare at wealthy people and think they must know something magical, while refusing to examine the ordinary habits that built their position. Stop here. What thoughts visit your mind the moment money comes up? Pressure, fear, envy, shame. That response matters because thought becomes behavior long before behavior becomes results. If money triggers stress, your body will rush to end the stress. That means quick decisions, avoidance, mental fog, impulse, rationalization. You will not call it a ritual, but it is. A ritual is simply a repeated act that shapes identity. Scarcity has rituals, so does wealth. Scarcity wakes up and checks what is missing. Wealth wakes up and checks what is possible. Scarcity asks how to survive the month. Wealth asks how to strengthen the next decade. Scarcity sees money as an event. Wealth sees money as a system. Those lines are worth keeping. The truth is, most people never notice the daily rehearsal. They say they want abundance, but their attention feeds lack from morning until night. They compare, they complain, they panic purchase. They avoid the spreadsheet. They resent people with more. They scroll through lifestyles they cannot afford, then try to copy the image of success without building the base of it. That constant pressure creates a kind of low-grade chaos in the mind. Chaos makes planning feel heavy, so you postpone. You postpone looking at the truth. You postpone facing debt. You postpone learning how money actually moves. Then you wonder why your life feels financially slippery. It feels slippery because you keep touching it only through emotion. This is where most people stop. They think scarcity is just external. They see inflation, rent, taxes, stagnant wages, and they are not wrong. But if you ignore the internal ritual, you stay powerless even when conditions improve. A tight environment does not require a scarce mind. In fact, a tight environment makes a disciplined mind even more necessary. Pause for a moment. Scarcity is not only around you. Sometimes it is rehearsed by you. Look at the language you use. I cannot afford that. Money disappears anyway. Nothing ever stays. Rich people are greedy. It must be nice. Those phrases feel harmless because they are common. But common language builds common lives. When you speak like helplessness is reality, your choices begin to match that posture. Language trains perception. Perception trains action. Action trains destiny. That is why the smallest shift matters. Not fake optimism, not denial, not pretending the numbers look better than they do. Clear sight, precise speech. Instead of saying you are bad with money, say you are undertrained and changing that. Instead of saying there is never enough, say you are learning to assign every dollar with intention. Instead of calling wealthy people lucky by default, study the structure behind their results. Study replaces resentment, and resentment has never made anybody rich. The truth is, scarcity loves drama because drama keeps you reactive. Wealth loves routine because routine keeps you stable. Scarcity says, act now before it is gone. Wealth says, wait, measure, decide. Scarcity wants to feel safe this second. Wealth wants to become powerful over time. This is not poetic, it is practical. Every time you delay gratification, you weaken the ritual of scarcity. Every time you review your numbers without flinching, you weaken it. Every time you buy because it fits a system instead of a mood, you weaken it. Every time you stop comparing your visible life to somebody else's highlight reel, you weaken it. Stop again. Think about how often your spending is really a reaction to what you have seen. The person stuck in scarcity is usually not lacking desire. That person is lacking internal order. Desire without order becomes frustration. Order turns desire into movement. That is why wealthy thinking often looks boring from the outside. It is repetitive, it is measured, it is calm. It is not ruled by sudden emotion. It is not trying to impress the room. It is trying to keep power. That is a very different goal. If your secret goal is still to feel rich in public, scarcity will own you in private. If your real goal becomes strength, your behavior changes fast. You stop buying proof. You start buying position. You stop worshipping convenience. You start respecting compounding. You stop asking what money can do for your image. You ask what it can do for your options. That question changes the room. The heavy insight is this: scarcity is not broken by earning alone. It is broken when the ritual is interrupted. You interrupt it in speech, in attention, in spending, in planning, in what you admire, in what you ignore, and in what you repeat to yourself when nobody is listening. Break the ritual often enough, and your mind stops expecting loss as the center of life. Then you start seeing the next trap for what it is: not caution, not wisdom, just an addiction to looking safe. Chapter 4. The addiction to looking safe. Looking safe can ruin your life while making you look responsible. That is what makes it dangerous. You keep the stable job you have outgrown. You avoid the conversation about money because you do not want friction. You refuse to learn sales because you do not want rejection. You never explore ownership because payroll feels cleaner. You stay in financial habits that are clearly too small for your future because at least they are familiar. The outside sees calm. The inside knows something is being buried. That buried thing is your capacity. Safety has a place. Recklessness is not power, but the addiction to looking safe is not really about wisdom. It is about protecting identity. You want to remain the person who never risks too much, never asks for too much, never fails too publicly. So you make caution your image and call it character. Stop for a second. Are you protecting your future, or are you protecting your ego from exposure? The truth is, many people do not fear losing money as much as they fear being seen trying. Trying makes your hunger visible. Trying exposes your ambition. Trying creates the possibility that you might not get the result. That is why so many people prefer quiet disappointment over visible effort. Visible effort threatens the image, and image has become expensive. When your financial decisions are built around looking sensible to other people, you stop making honest choices. You buy the car that signals stability. You rent the place that proves you are doing fine. You keep subscriptions you barely use because canceling them feels like a step down. You avoid negotiating because you do not want to seem difficult. You keep performing balance while your private numbers tell a harsher story. This is where most people stop. They would rather defend an image than correct a problem. They would rather keep the peace in the room than gain power in their lives. They would rather look settled than become strong. That trade is deadly over time. Looking safe is a social habit. Becoming wealthy is often a private discipline. Social habits are about approval. Private discipline is about results. Approval rewards appearance. Results reward structure. Those two worlds rarely operate by the same rules. That is why the person building real wealth often looks strange for a while. Less flashy, more deliberate, more selective, harder to impress, harder to rush. That person is not trying to look safe. That person is trying to become secure. Security and the appearance of safety are not the same thing. Pause here. Which do you actually have? Security comes from reserves, skills, control, low emotional spending, strong earning ability, and the nerve to make disciplined decisions. Looking safe comes from appearances, social conformity, and avoidance of tension. Security can survive opinion. Looking safe depends on it. And dependence on opinion will keep you poor. The truth is, wealth requires a willingness to be briefly misunderstood. You may have to say no more often. You may have to live below what others expect you to live on based on your income. You may have to study while others relax. You may have to refuse invitations, status games, and lifestyle upgrades that would make you look successful before you are stable enough to sustain them. That takes control. Control is quiet. Control does not need applause. Control can sit in a plain room with a growing account and feel more powerful than somebody dressed in debt. That is a hard truth because image has become a drug. People want to be seen as thriving long before they are rooted in anything real, so they buy the look. They finance the signal. They rent the identity, and the future pays the bill. Stop again. How much of your financial life is actually built around being perceived correctly? This question matters because the addiction to looking safe does more than shape spending. It shapes earning. You do not ask for the raise. You do not build the extra income stream. You do not start the side work. You do not develop the hard skill that would let you move. Why? Because change would make you visible, and visibility would force you to stop hiding behind your current role. That is the hidden prison. This is where most people stop. They say they want more money, but they do not want the social discomfort that often comes before more money. They want the outcome without the strain on identity. They want the reward without the temporary awkwardness. That is not how this works. Real growth often looks unstable before it becomes solid. The person who becomes wealthy learns to separate external calm from internal truth. If the numbers are weak, that truth gets faced. If the habits are sloppy, that truth comes to light. If the life is built around appearance, that truth gets faced. No performance, no excuses, just clean confrontation. That is how power begins. The heavy insight is severe but necessary. Every time you choose the appearance of safety over actual strength, you train your life to remain fragile. You may look fine, you may sound fine, you may even feel fine for a while, but beneath the performance, dependence grows, and dependence has a cost that compounds in silence. Sooner or later, you have to stop asking what looks stable and start asking what builds freedom. That question turns the mirror towards something even deeper. Your financial future is shaped not only by your habits, it is shaped by the identity those habits are protecting. Chapter 5. Your identity is budgeting your future. You can make a budget on paper and still have another budget running in secret. That hidden budget is identity. It decides what feels normal, what feels possible, what feels threatening, and what level of success your nervous system is willing to hold. That is why effort alone does not fix everything. If your identity is still tied to struggle, struggle will keep finding a way back in. If your identity is attached to being the generous rescuer, money will leave through guilt. If your identity is built around proving that you are not materialistic, you may reject opportunities that would actually strengthen your life. If your identity is built around looking successful, you will overspend to maintain the costume. The numbers obey the self-image more than people want to admit. Stop for a second. Who do you become around money? The saver, the spender, the helper, the avoider, the martyr, the chaser. That role matters. The truth is, identity creates permission. If you see yourself as somebody who always struggles, you will tolerate chaos longer than necessary because chaos fits the script. If you see yourself as somebody who never gets ahead, discipline will feel unnatural. If you see yourself as someone who is always starting over, you will make choices that preserve the pattern and then call it fate. Fate is often just repeated identity. This is where most people stop. They adjust tactics, but never question the character they keep performing. They try a new budget, a new app, a new income plan, a new savings challenge. Then old emotions return, and the old identity quietly takes the wheel. The system fails not because it was weak, but because the self-image remained in command. That is why real financial change feels personal. It is personal. You are not just learning where money should go. You are confronting who you have been allowed to be. Maybe you were the child who heard stress in every adult conversation about bills. Maybe you became the person who tried to make life feel lighter for everybody else, even when it hurt you. Maybe you learned that wanting more made people suspicious. Maybe you were praised for sacrifice and never taught control. Those lessons sink deep. Pause here. Some of your money patterns were not chosen, but keeping them will be. A wealthy identity is not flashy. It is clean. It does not panic at numbers. It does not run from decisions. It does not seek emotional rescue through spending. It does not need every purchase to tell a story. It respects money because it respects choice, and choice is power. That line matters. When identity changes, ordinary actions become easier. Saving stops feeling like punishment. Saying no stops feeling cruel. Tracking expenses stops feeling shameful. Delayed gratification stops feeling like deprivation. Why? Because the actions now fit the self-image. They support who you are becoming, rather than threaten who you have been. That is why some people seem naturally disciplined. Often they are not more gifted. Their identity and their behavior are finally aligned. The truth is, you cannot keep worshipping the old version of yourself and still expect a new financial reality. If the old version is tied to chaos, pleasing, fear, impulsiveness, or low standards, then every new dollar will get trained by old instincts. It will serve the old character until the character changes. This is not about pretending to be rich. It is about becoming trustworthy with power. Stop again. If money stayed with you in larger amounts, would your current identity know what to do with it? That question is not an insult. It is a door. Because wealth requires emotional maturity, the ability to hold more without becoming louder, softer, greedier, or more scattered. The ability to earn more without upgrading every visible part of life, just to prove movement. the ability to have access without needing to display access, the ability to keep your standards when nobody is watching. Identity decides whether you can hold that. This is where most people stop. They want more money, but they do not want more responsibility. They want higher income, but not higher discipline. They want freedom, but not the daily restraint that protects freedom. So the fantasy remains easier than the reality, and the reality remains far away. But the turn happens when you stop asking what you can afford and start asking what kind of person can be trusted with more. That question changes spending. It changes friendships. It changes your schedule. It changes what you tolerate from yourself. The person money trusts is not perfect. That person is present, awake, honest, measured, hard to manipulate, hard to tempt with noise, able to sit in silence and make choices from principle rather than under pressure. That kind of identity does not arrive by accident. It is trained in private. The heavy insight is this: your future is being budgeted right now by the person you keep practicing. Every reaction, every excuse, every quiet standard, every repeated thought is writing a financial script. If you want a different ending, you need a different self-image carrying the pen. And that demands a new kind of stillness, because nothing solid changes until you learn how to stop reacting long enough to see clearly. Chapter 6. Silence before strategy. Most bad money decisions are noisy before they are costly. They begin with an internal rush, the urge to fix, prove, reward, numb, or escape. The mind starts speaking fast, the body follows, and once the body follows, the wallet usually obeys. This is why silence matters more than people think. Not silence as decoration, silence as discipline. If you cannot be still around money, you cannot be clear around money. Clarity is expensive to people who live in reaction. That is why the turn begins here, not with a clever strategy, not with some secret investment idea, not with a bigger vision board. It begins when you learn to sit still long enough for impulse to lose its authority. Wealth grows in the space between feeling and action. If that space does not exist, control does not exist. Stop for a second. How often do you act financially just to stop feeling something? The truth is, silence exposes the real reason behind your choices. In silence, you notice the fear under the purchase, the loneliness under the upgrade, the insecurity under the expensive signal, the exhaustion under the convenience cost. Silence takes the costume off the impulse. That can feel brutal at first, because noise has protected you. Noise lets you move fast enough to avoid being looked at too closely. Noise lets you say yes before discipline can speak. Noise lets you spend before truth can interrupt the mood. Silence removes that protection. Suddenly, you can see the pattern as it happens. Suddenly, the excuse sounds weak. Suddenly, you are face to face with your own undirected energy. That moment is uncomfortable. This is where most people stop. They do not want to sit in that discomfort. They would rather keep reacting than confront how much of their life has been ruled by unexamined emotion. So they call themselves spontaneous. They call themselves generous. They call themselves tired. Anything but what is real. What is real is this: untrained emotion is expensive. Pause here. Say that to yourself quietly. Untrained emotion is expensive. Once you understand that, silence becomes useful. Before any non-essential purchase, silence. Before any emotional reply about money, silence. Before saying yes to something because you feel guilty, silence. Before upgrading your lifestyle because income rose, silence. A few clean minutes of stillness can save months of regret. Silence is where desire gets tested. If the desire fades, it was mood. If it stays and survives examination, it may be a signal. Wealthy people are not superior because they never want things. They are stronger because they do not obey every want the moment it arrives. They let desire sit before truth. That habit creates power. The truth is, strategy without silence becomes another form of chaos. You can build the perfect budget, the perfect investing plan, the perfect debt attack strategy, and still break it all if you remain emotionally loud. Structure only works when the mind inside it can hold steady. That is why discipline is not harshness, it is protection. You protect your future by slowing down the moment. You protect your attention by not letting every urge become a command. You protect your finances by refusing to let temporary feelings write permanent outcomes. That is what mature control looks like. Calm on the surface, strong underneath. Stop again. You do not need another trick. You need more space between urge and movement. In that space, several things start to happen. You notice patterns sooner. You see which people trigger spending. You see which times of day make you careless. You see what kind of stress makes you seek relief. You stop moralizing everything and start observing it. Observation creates options. Options create control, and control creates wealth. This is where most people stop. They keep asking what to buy, what to cut, what to invest in, but they ignore the state of mind from which those decisions come. A scattered mind can turn any income into confusion. A quiet mind can turn modest income into structure. Silence also changes how you face lack. Instead of panicking, you assess. Instead of dramatizing, you prioritize. Instead of collapsing into shame, you make the next right decision. That is not glamorous. It is powerful, because money respects consistency more than intensity. Read that again in your mind. Money respects consistency more than intensity. When silence becomes part of your daily life, you stop spending to prove movement. You start acting from principle. You stop treating every financial discomfort like an emergency. You start seeing some discomfort as training. You stop rushing to feel better. You start building the capacity to get better. That is the turn. The heavy insight is simple but hard. If you cannot sit with yourself, you cannot lead your money. If you cannot lead your money, more of it will not save you. Silence is not empty. Silence is where your authority comes back. It is where the scattered parts of you stop voting. It is where discipline gains a voice, loud enough to be heard. And once that voice strengthens, you are ready for something practical and sharp. Because wealth is built by how you use choice when nobody forces your hand. Chapter 7. Discipline makes money stay. Getting money is exciting. Keeping money is character. That is why so many people reach higher incomes without ever achieving stability. They know how to chase. They do not know how to hold. They know how to work under pressure. They do not know how to remain measured when relief finally arrives. So the moment the numbers improve, the standards collapse. Spending expands, discipline softens, pride gets loud, and the old leak returns through a bigger pipe. Money does not stay where structure is weak. That line deserves your full attention. The truth is, discipline is not what helps you survive low income only. Discipline is what prevents success from becoming another trap. Without discipline, every increase in income becomes permission instead of position. You earn more and immediately adjust your life to consume it. The car changes, the rent changes, the habits change, the expectations change. Soon the pressure is back, just dressed better. This is where most people stop. They confuse increased access with increased security. Those are not the same thing. Access can vanish fast. Security is built slowly, through controlled repetition. Stop for a second. If your income doubled next month, what exactly would your first 10 decisions reveal about you? That question exposes more than any spreadsheet. Discipline keeps money because it assigns purpose before emotion arrives. It tells every dollar where it belongs before the world starts making suggestions. It does not wait for perfect conditions. It operates as a standard. Rent, food, savings, investing, learning, margin. The categories are not the point is command. Command changes everything. When money has no assignment, appetite takes over. Appetite is endless. It can wear luxury, it can wear generosity, it can wear convenience, it can wear self-care, but underneath it is still the same force. More for now, more to feel, more to show, more to quiet something inside. Discipline hears that voice and says, no, not yet. That is power. Pause here. Discipline is not denial of pleasure. It is the refusal to let pleasure lead. There is a reason wealthy thinking often looks repetitive. Repetition protects progress. The same transfer on the same day, the same review every week, the same pause before major spending, the same limits that keep lifestyle inflation from swallowing future freedom. Repetition may feel dull to the ego, but it feels like strength to the future. And the future matters more than the ego. The truth is, people who build long-term wealth respect boring systems. They do not need every financial move to feel dramatic. They value automation, order, and consistency because these things reduce the room for mood to interfere. Mood is unstable. Systems are steady. That is why systems win. This is where most people stop. They rely on motivation. Motivation is useful for starting. It is useless for maintaining. Discipline maintains. Discipline keeps the promise after the emotion leaves. Discipline protects the plan after the excitement fades. Discipline says the same yes to the right things and the same no to the wrong things until the pattern becomes identity. That is how money starts trusting you. Stop again. Ask yourself honestly, do your current habits make you look like a temporary earner or a long-term holder? A long-term holder understands delayed reward, not as punishment, as strategy. That person can earn more and still live with restraint, can want more and still wait, can have access without needing to use it, can sit in an ordinary month without creating artificial drama through unnecessary spending. That calm is rare, and because it is rare, it becomes valuable. Discipline also changes your relationship with mistakes. Instead of spiraling after a bad month, you reset. Instead of using a setback as proof that you will always be behind, you correct and continue. Emotional collapse is expensive. Clean recovery preserves momentum that matters more than perfection. The truth is, wealth is often less about brilliance and more about not leaking. Not leaking through ego, not leaking through impulse, not leaking through carelessness, not leaking through shame. A disciplined person may not look extraordinary on any single day, but over years, the results become hard to ignore because nothing powerful is happening in public during most of it. It is happening in private transfers, private restraint, private review, private refusal, private patience. That is what money stays for. It stays for order. It stays for maturity. It stays for the person who knows the difference between using wealth and performing wealth. The heavy insight is sharp. If money never seems to stay, the problem may not be income. It may be that your habits still serve appetite more than authority. When authority takes over, even small amounts begin to gather with a different energy. They stop vanishing, they start forming a base. And once a base exists, choice becomes cleaner, not easier, cleaner. Because real power is not found in having endless options. It is found in directing the options you already have. Chapter 8. Choice creates power. People talk about money as if power lives in the amount. But the amount is only part of it. Real power lives in what money allows you to refuse, delay, pursue, protect, and build. Power lives in choice, not fake choice. Not the illusion of choice that comes from credit, image, and short-term access. Real choice, the kind that comes from reserves, discipline, clarity, and self-command. The kind that lets you walk away from manipulation. the kind that lets you think instead of panic, the kind that lets you act on principle rather than under pressure. That kind of power is quiet. It does not need to announce itself because it can withstand things. Stop for a second. How many of your current choices are actually reactions forced by weak financial positioning? That is not a comfortable question, but comfort is not the point. The truth is, dependence steals voice. When you need every paycheck immediately, your standards bend. When you have no margin, fear gets a vote in every conversation. When you cannot absorb delay, inconvenience, or surprise, urgency starts running your life. And urgency is a terrible leader. Urgency narrows the mind. Power widens it. This is where most people stop. They chase money for lifestyle, but never ask what kind of freedom their lifestyle is taking away. Bigger expenses can create a prettier cage. More visible success can come with less actual room to choose. You can look upgraded and still be trapped. In fact, a lot of people are. Choice is the real currency. When you have choice, you negotiate differently. You work differently. You rest differently. You think differently. You are harder to pressure because you are not always standing at the edge of need. That space changes your posture in life. Not because you become careless, because you become less easy to control. And that is part of what wealth is for. Pause here. Money is not only for buying, it is for refusing. Refusing the job that crushes your soul. Refusing the friendship built around financial guilt. Refusing the rushed decision. Refusing the bad deal. Refusing to say yes just because you are scared of what saying no might cost. Every disciplined dollar can become a future no. Every thoughtful reserve can become a protective line around your standards. That is not greed. That is self-respect. The truth is, most people spend their power the moment they touch it. They use raises to increase appearance. They use bonuses to chase relief. They use credit to imitate freedom. Then when real decisions arrive, they discover they still cannot choose much. Their image improved. Their options did not. Options are what matter. This is where most people stop. They want the feeling of abundance without the architecture of abundance. But abundance is not simply having more. It is having enough order that fear no longer owns every decision. It is the ability to think beyond the next emergency because you have created a buffer against it. That buffer is sacred. Stop again. What are you building right now? A life that looks rich, or a life that can say no? Choice also changes how you relate to time. When you have no financial power, time often feels hijacked. You react, you scramble, you patch things up, you live in fragments. But when power grows, time starts opening. You can plan, you can learn, you can recover. You can choose quality over urgency. That alone changes the texture of a life, and it starts long before wealth looks impressive from the outside. The truth is, every disciplined choice today is buying future authority. Authority over pace, authority over environment, authority over work, authority over who gets access to your energy. Money without authority is just movement. Money with authority becomes freedom. This is not about control for the sake of control. It is about protection. Protection of your attention, your health, your standards, your peace. Financial power is not cold, it is responsible. It gives you the ability to care without collapsing, to help without self-destruction, and to move without begging circumstances for mercy. That is a different life. This is where most people stop. They settle for enough to cope. But coping is not power. Coping is delay. Power begins when your choices are no longer dictated by immediate pressure. Power begins when your money gives your values room to act. The heavy insight is this: wealth is not really measured by what you can buy in public. It is measured by how much truth you can live in private without fear forcing you into compromise. Choice creates that truth. Choice creates that room. Choice creates the kind of power that does not need performance. And when you start living from that power, your identity changes in a way that cannot be faked, because you no longer chase money for status. You become the kind of person money can sit with, in peace. Chapter 9. Become the person money trusts. Money does not trust desperation. It may visit desperation. It may even pass through it in large amounts for a season, but it does not settle there. It does not stay where panic makes the rules, where ego spends the future, where every gain gets turned into display, or where silence cannot survive the urge to prove something. If you want long-term wealth, you have to become somebody money can trust. That sentence is not mystical. It is practical. Can you hold more without talking more? Can you earn more without loosening your standards? Can you have more access without increasing your appetite? Can you make more choices without becoming more scattered? These questions matter because money amplifies character. It does not replace it. Stop for a second. If more money made your current habits louder, would that really help you? The truth is, people chase wealth as if it will save them from themselves. It will not. More money will not fix avoidance. It will fund it. It will not fix insecurity. It will decorate it. It will not fix indiscipline. It will amplify the consequences. That is why identity is everything at this stage, not image, identity. The person money trusts has certain qualities that cannot be performed for long: emotional steadiness, patience, honesty, clean standards, delayed ego, respect for systems, capacity to sit in silence when temptation rises, capacity to face truth without drama when mistakes happen. That person is difficult to manipulate, and because that person is difficult to manipulate, money becomes safer there. This is where most people stop. They want the rewards of trust without becoming trustworthy. They want opportunities, access, and growth, but they still react like children when pressure rises. They still seek comfort at the cost of the future. They still hide from numbers. They still want to look rich before they are rooted. That is not readiness. Pause here. Wealth is not asking whether you want it. Wealth is asking whether you can hold it without betraying it. That betrayal shows up in familiar ways: chasing trends you do not understand, overspending after a win because restraint feels boring, mixing generosity with guilt until your resources become unstable, saying yes to every request because being needed feels good, avoiding structure because structure makes you answerable to yourself. Money sees all of that, not literally, but functionally. It responds to who you are through the outcomes your habits produce. Habits are the language money hears, not intentions, not declarations, not your public attitude, your habits. The truth is, trustworthy people do boring things with consistency. They review, they plan, they wait, they learn, they correct. They do not confuse a good month with a new identity. They do not treat a setback like a total collapse. They remain measured. That steadiness is what allows compounding to take root. Compounding needs calm. This is where most people stop. They want dramatic proof that they are changing, but real change often gets quiet before it gets visible. Your private standards rise first. Your reactions slow down first. Your spending becomes cleaner first. Your envy starts dying first. Your need to signal begins to fade first. The bank balance may lag behind for a while. Stay with the process anyway, because the process is making you holdable. Stop again. You are not just trying to get wealth. You are trying to become a safe place for wealth to remain. That means you cannot worship every chance to feel rich. You cannot keep chasing the emotional high of access. You cannot let money become your applause. Money must become your instrument, something directed with control, something used to build room, not noise. The person money trusts does not need constant reward. That person understands timing. understands sacrifice without bitterness, understands that the strongest flex is often invisible, understands that privacy is protection, understands that silence is often richer than display. Those truths mature a human being, and mature human beings handle resources better. The heavy insight is clear. Wealth becomes possible when you stop asking how to get more and start asking how to become stable enough to keep more. Stability is not laziness, it is contained strength, it is appetite under command, it is ego under discipline, it is fear without obedience, it is desire without collapse. Once you become that kind of person, the final shift can happen, not a tactic, not a budget trick, something deeper, a private standard so strong that even when nobody is watching, your life starts moving like wealth is already your responsibility. Chapter 10. Wealth begins in private. Nothing lasting begins in the spotlight. Not discipline, not control, not strength, not wealth. Those things begin in rooms where nobody claps, in mornings when you want convenience and choose structure, in evenings when you want escape and choose reflection, in ordinary weeks when no crisis forces you to be sharp, but you stay sharp anyway because your standards are no longer dependent on pressure. That is the final shift. You stop living as if discipline is a temporary response to hardship. You start living as if discipline is your private way of life. That changes money at the root, because it changes who you are when no audience is present. And private behavior is what public results are built on. Stop for a second. Who are you financially when nobody sees the choice except you? That answer is the truth. The truth is, wealth begins in private because identity is trained there, not in declarations, not in content, not in emotional moments of inspiration, in repeated actions carried out without performance. The transfer you make when nobody would know if you skipped it. The purchase you refuse when nobody would question it. The review you do when the numbers are uncomfortable. The silence you keep when your ego wants display. That is where power is born. This is where most people stop. They want to feel different before they live different. But private standards come first. Feeling often follows late. You do the right thing before it feels natural. You keep doing it while it still feels plain. Then, after enough repetition, your nervous system stops fighting the new identity. It begins to recognize it as home. That is when wealth stops being fantasy and starts becoming character. Pause here. You are not waiting for proof anymore. You are becoming proof. Private wealth building is not glamorous. It is often slow, repetitive, and invisible. That is exactly why it works. Noise attracts ego. Privacy protects discipline. In private, there is less temptation to perform, less pressure to explain, less need to rush visible results. You can focus on what matters: margin, ownership, skill, restraint, patience, clean choices made over and over until they start compounding into a life. Compounding is quiet by nature. The truth is, the world notices wealth late, long after the person has changed, long after the habits became normal, long after the emotional chaos lost its authority, long after the mind stopped treating money as relief and started treating it as responsibility. By the time the outside sees stability, the inside has usually been under construction for years. That construction happens in private, and it has rules. You tell the truth even when it bruises your pride. You do not spend to repair your mood. You do not seek applause through upgrades. You do not use generosity to avoid boundaries. You do not chase comfort at the cost of freedom. You do not let a good month make you careless or a bad month make you quit. You remain under command. This is where most people stop. They think wealth is a reward. But wealth, in its deepest form, is a responsibility given to people who can carry it without becoming servants to it. Money is not the master in that life. You are. Calmly, quietly, consistently. Stop again. Let this land. If your private life is undisciplined, your financial future will always feel unstable, no matter how much you earn. Because income is loud, identity is deeper. The final form of abundance is not endless spending. It is inner order. It is waking up without dread, because your numbers are not ruling your emotions. It is making decisions from values instead of panic. It is having enough control that your future is no longer being sold off in pieces to satisfy the present. It is being able to sit in silence with your choices and feel no need to defend them. That is wealth. Not because it looks impressive, because it gives you power over yourself. And power over yourself is the root from which every durable form of freedom grows. When you have that, money stops being a source of confusion. It becomes a disciplined extension of your standards. It becomes stored choice, stored time, stored peace, stored strength. And once money begins serving that kind of life, it is no longer entering a broken room. It is entering a ruled house. Money leaves fast when it is asked to do the work your mind refuses to do. The richest shift happens the day comfort stops being your first command. A weak relationship with money is usually a weak relationship with truth. Discipline is not harsh. Discipline is the shape of self-respect in action. Scarcity is rehearsed in private, long before it appears in public. Every impulse you do not obey becomes strength you can use later. A budget without identity change is just a fragile promise. Silence saves more money than excitement ever will. Looking safe has kept many people broke with perfect manners. The future changes when money stops being medicine. Wealth does not begin when income rises. It begins when reaction falls. Power is not in what you can buy. Power is in what you can refuse. The truth is, a calm mind holds money better than a loud one. This is where most people stop. Right at the border between insight and discipline, private standards decide public outcomes with ruthless fairness. You do not become wealthy by touching more money. You become wealthy by becoming harder to pull apart. Freedom grows each time you choose structure over mood. Money trusts the person who can hold desire without surrendering authority. The strongest life is built by choices that need no witness. When your inner house is ruled, your outer life stops collapsing so easily. The final form of wealth is not display, it is quiet control.